All right, strap in everyone, because today we are diving into some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, no kidding.
We've got a mountain of reports, articles, you name it, even some pretty heated online debates. And the big question hanging over all of it is this. Are Trump and Musk, are they trying to like reshape America?
I mean, not just like tweak a few things here and there.
Right, exactly. We're talking potentially changing how the government actually works.
Yeah.
Fundamental changes.
Yeah, and what's really got my attention is that a lot of these sources, they're making comparisons to some pretty dark moments in history, like the rise of Hitler, that kind of thing. They're not saying it's the exact same situation, obviously, but those echoes are definitely there.
And that's what's making everyone so nervous.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so let's try to break this down a little bit.
No.
One of the biggest things that's got everyone talking is this whole thing with Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
DOGE.
It sounds like a meme, almost, but it's not funny at all, is it?
No, not really. What we're seeing is that Musk, who, let's not forget, wasn't elected to anything, has absolutely no experience in government, is suddenly being given access to like all these super sensitive systems. And his team, they're making decisions about the future of entire federal agencies. And this is setting off all kinds of alarm bells for cybersecurity experts. They're worried about vulnerabilities, potential privacy breaches, the whole 9 yards.
It's kind of wild, right? And then you've got this whole other layer to the story, which is this 19-year-old DOGE technologist, Edward Coristine. His online handle is Big Balls, which, I mean, I'm not making this up.
Good balls, wow.
Yeah, and this guy, he apparently controls domains that might be linked to Russia, and he's got this whole history of encouraging DDoS attacks. What does that even mean in plain English?
Okay, so a DDoS attack, it's basically a way to like overload a website or an online service with so much traffic that it crashes. You're basically shutting it down. And the fact that someone like Corstein, with his background and his potential connections, is now involved in government system, I mean, it just makes you wonder what kind of vetting process is going on over there at DOGE.
If any, right?
Yeah, if any.
So it seems like they're just kind of like shaking things up without really thinking about the consequences. And one way they're doing that is by targeting certain agencies, like USA, the Department of Education, NOAA, the agency that keeps track of climate change. Like, what's the logic behind that, if there is any?
Well, some sources are suggesting that this is all part of a bigger plan by Trump, probably with Musk's help to like downsize the federal government. They're offering these mass buyouts to employees, locking people out of their offices. There's just this whole atmosphere of fear and confusion among the people who work for these agencies.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, it's not just about efficiency. It's about weakening these agencies, taking away their power.
That seems to be the case, yeah.
But why, though? Why would they do that?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Some analysts are saying that it's a way to demoralize the federal workforce, make it smaller, make it harder for them to push back against the administration's policies, or to keep an eye on what's going on.
So basically getting rid of any potential roadblocks.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, this is where things start to get really interesting and maybe a little scary. There are people out there comparing what's happening right now to how Hitler took apart the Weimar Republic in Germany.
Yeah.
Are they being overly dramatic, or is there something to that comparison?
Well, there's some historical parallels here that are definitely worth thinking about. Like, Hitler was able to dismantle the Weimar Republic really quickly in just 53 days. And he did it by using the existing constitutional mechanisms. He undermined democracy from the inside. And one of the ways he did that was by getting the support of wealthy industrialists, people who saw him as a way to protect their own interests.
And that's what's making people nervous about Trump and Musk, right? They're both incredibly wealthy. They have a ton of influence, and they're both pretty outspoken about their opposition to regulations, government intervention, that kind of thing.
Right. The sources we've been looking at are suggesting that billionaires like Musk could be gaining a really unprecedented level of influence over government policies, over institutions. And that's a trend that has some pretty disturbing historical precedents.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the oligarchs who supported Hitler, a lot of them ended up being pushed aside, even imprisoned, once he had consolidated his power.
Exactly.
So the big question becomes, who's really in control here?
And what happens when those in power decide they don't need the support of the people who helped them get there anymore?
That's a pretty chilling thought. So given all this, is there any chance of stopping them? Is anyone pushing back?
Well, the good news is there are signs that people are pushing back. We're seeing legal challenges from states and advocacy groups, pushback from Congress, and definitely a lot of criticism from the media.
Okay, so it's not like everyone's just letting this happen.
No, no, not at all. But the question is it going to be enough? Oh, one source I read, it was a piece by a legal scholar, and he was arguing that the courts are going to be the main battleground in this whole fight. He said that Trump and Musk are pushing the limits of executive power, and it's going to be up to the judiciary to like rein them in.
Interesting. But what about the rest of us? Like, what can ordinary people actually do?
Well, one thing that I saw emphasized in a lot of the sources is public awareness. Like, the more people understand what's happening, the more pressure they can put on their elected officials to actually do something about it.
Right, because if enough people get angry or concerned, politicians have to listen.
Yeah, exactly. And there's already evidence that public opinion is starting to shift. Polls are showing that more and more Americans are worried about where the country is headed, and they're starting to see the connections between Trump's policies, Musk's influence, and the weakening of democratic norms.
Yeah. Speaking of democratic norms, there's this whole other layer to this story, which is, the influence of money in politics.
Yeah.
I mean, Trump and Musk both have a ridiculous amount of money, and they've both shown that they're willing to use it to get what they want.
That's a really key point. A lot of sources are talking about how we're seeing this trend where billionaires like Musk can basically buy their way into the political system. They can use their wealth to influence policy decisions and shape the public narrative. And a lot of times those policies end up benefiting them financially. So it's like this kind of feedback loop.
So it's like a rigged game where the house always wins.
Kind of, yeah. And it's not just about individual billionaires, it's about corporations too, right? We're seeing corporations gaining more and more power, and often it's at the expense of workers and ordinary citizens.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. I mean, some sources even go so far as to say that America is becoming an oligarchy, which I guess means ruled by a small group of wealthy elites.
Right. An oligarchy is basically a system where a small group of really wealthy people hold most of the power, and they use that power to control the government, the economy, everything for their own benefit.
And the crazy thing is, it's all happening in such a subtle way, right?
Yeah.
Most people are just trying to get by. They don't have time to follow all the complex political stuff that's happening behind the scenes.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have, journalists, researchers, even just concerned citizens who are out there digging into this stuff and connecting the dots. They play a really crucial role in holding power to account and letting the public know what's actually going on.
So, given all of this, do you think there's any hope? I mean, it's easy to feel like overwhelmed and powerless when you look at all of this.
I wouldn't say it's hopeless, but it's definitely a challenge, right? We're at a crossroads, and the choices we make in the next few years are really going to determine the future of this country.
Okay, but what can we do? I mean, like, practically speaking, what can people actually do to push back against this trend towards oligarchy?
Well, one of the most important things is to stay informed, to stay engaged. Don't just tune out the news because it's depressing, Pay attention to what's happening, read different sources, and talk to people about the issues.
So knowledge is power, like they say.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you know about what's shaping our world, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions and to take action.
And what about voting? I mean, that's kind of the most basic way to participate in a democracy, right?
Voting is absolutely essential, but it's not enough to just vote. We need to be informed voters, right? We need to research the candidates, understand their positions on the issues, and hold them accountable for what they do.
Right, because if we just vote blindly, we're basically just giving them a blank check to do whatever they want.
Exactly. And that's what's so dangerous about what's happening right now, right? We have a system that's increasingly rigged in favor of the wealthy and the powerful, and we have to actively push back against that.
So it's not just about voting for the right people, it's about actually changing the system itself.
Right. We have to advocate for reforms that make our democracy more responsive to the needs of regular people, not just the wealthy and the well-connected.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty big challenge.
It is. But it's not impossible, right? Throughout history, people have fought for and won greater democracy, even when it seemed like there was no chance.
Okay, so let's talk about some of those historical examples, because one thing that keeps coming up in these sources is this idea of learning from the past.
Right, and that's a really important point. We can learn a lot from how other societies have dealt with challenges similar to the ones we're facing now. For example, a lot of sources point to the progressive era in the early 1900s. There was this wave of social and political activism that led to some really significant reforms, things like women's suffrage, labor rights, regulations to curb the power of monopolies.
So it's like a reminder that change is possible even when things look really bad.
Exactly. The progressive era shows us that when people come together and demand change, they can actually make a difference.
Okay, so we've talked about staying informed, voting, pushing for reforms, learning from history. What else can people do to fight back against this move towards oligarchy?
Another really important thing is to support organizations that are working to protect our democracy and to promote social justice. There are so many groups out there that are fighting for things like voting rights, economic equality, environmental protection, all these important causes.
So it's like find your tribe, join the fight.
Yeah, exactly. There's strength in numbers, and when we work together, we can make our voices heard and have a much bigger impact.
Okay, so it sounds like there are things that people can do, even if it feels like a David versus Goliath situation.
That's right. It's easy to feel small and powerless when you're up against these huge forces, but we have to remember that we're not alone in this. There are millions of people who are worried about the same things and who are working to create a better future.
So it's like a reminder that hope is not a luxury, it's essential.
Absolutely. Hope is what keeps us going when things are tough, and it's what inspires us to keep fighting for a better world.
Well, that's a good thought to hold on to. But we're not done yet. We've got one more part of this deep dive to go, and I have a feeling it's going to get even more interesting. We've been talking about this trend of powerful people getting more and more control, and it kind of makes me think about history. Like, how did guys like Hitler actually rise to power? I know it's a touchy comparison, but some of the sources we've looked at are suggesting there might be some parallels there.
Yeah, you got to be careful with those kinds of comparisons for sure.
Yeah.
But I do think there are some historical lessons we can learn from what happened then. One key thing about Hitler's rise was his ability to like exploit the economic anxiety and the social divisions in Germany at the time. He offered these really simplistic solutions, scapegoated minorities, appealed to that desire for a strong leader, someone who could bring back national pride.
And we're seeing some of that today too, right? Like economic inequality is getting worse, political polarization is more intense. It feels like the conditions are ripe for someone to come along and take advantage of all that anxiety.
Exactly. When people are struggling, when they're feeling insecure, they're much more likely to fall for these charismatic leaders who offer easy answers, who promise to fix everything. And then you add in the power of social media, how easy it is to spread misinformation and propaganda these days. And it's a recipe for disaster.
It's like a tinderbox just waiting for a spark.
Hmm.
And with people like Trump and Musk using their platforms to spread this divisive rhetoric, to sow distrust in institutions, it feels like that spark is getting closer and closer.
One source I read, it was really chilling. It was a historical account of the oligarchs who supported Hitler's rise to power. They thought they could control him, they thought they could use him to get what they wanted, but in the end, they ended up being victims of the very system they helped create.
It's a cautionary tale for sure. Makes you wonder if the billionaires who are backing Trump and Musk right now are going to end up regretting their choices. Like they're playing with fire and they don't even realize how badly they could get burned.
You never know what the future holds, but if history teaches us anything, it's that. That power is a double-edged sword,
Yeah.
That the people who try to wield it often end up being consumed by it.
So where does that leave us?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a president who seems determined to tear down the government, a billionaire tech CEO who acts like he owns the place, and a population that's more and more divided and disillusioned. It's hard not to feel overwhelmed and pessimistic.
I get it. I totally get it. But we can't give in to despair. We just can't. One thing that keeps me going is the resilience of the human spirit. Throughout history, people have faced down tyranny. They fought for a better world. And we can too. We can do the same.
Okay, but what can we do? I mean, besides the things we talked about earlier, staying informed, voting, supporting organizations that are fighting for democracy, is there anything else?
Yeah, one really crucial thing is to engage in critical thinking. Don't just believe everything you hear or read. Question it. Look at things from different angles. Be wary of people who offer simple solutions to complicated problems.
It's like we need to build up a resistance to propaganda, to misinformation. We need to be able to see through the lies and the distortions and demand the truth. Demand accountability.
Exactly. We have to protect ourselves against the hate and division that's spreading through our society. And one of the best ways to do that is to cultivate healthy skepticism and a commitment to critical thinking.
And we have to remember that we're not powerless. We have a voice. We have a vote. We can hold our leaders accountable, and we can demand a system that works for everyone, not just a select few.
Absolutely. And there are so many ways to get involved beyond voting. You can volunteer for a political campaign, you can join a protest, write to your representatives, talk to your friends and family about the issues that are important to you, make your voice heard.
It's a call to action, isn't it? A reminder that democracy isn't a spectator sport. You got to be an active participant, and you got to be willing to defend it against the people who would try to undermine it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We can't afford to be complacent. The stakes are just too high.
Well, folks, it's been quite a journey today, exploring these worrying trends, grappling with some really big questions about power, democracy, the future of America. I know it's a lot to take in, but I hope this deep dive has given you something to think about.
The sources we talked about today, they're just a starting point. Keep digging, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep engaging with the issues that matter most to you.
And remember, even when things seem really dark, there's always hope, and there's always something we can do to make a difference. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.